Welcome everybody to this Accessible Materials Part 3, Microsoft Word Documents. Our presenter this afternoon is Marissa DeMaya from the Southwest ADA Center. Welcome, Marissa.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Thank you, everybody, for having me. That is our website. It is www.southwestada.org if you are curious or want to know a little bit more about us. And our toll-free line is 800-949-4232. And if you call that number, depending on where your phone number is based, you'll get the ADA Center that serves you. So anywhere you are in the U.S., if you happen to call that number, you will be directed to the ADA Center that serves you, just an FYI. Very quickly, as Anne Marie mentioned so graciously in her intro, I am with the Southwest ADA Center, and we're one of 10 centers across the U.S. that provide information, resources, and training to groups, consumers, you name it, about their rights and responsibilities under the ADA. You can call that number if you want to know more. You can also email us at swdbtac@ilru.org, and I'll tell you a secret. If you email that address, that is my alias. It goes straight to me. So if you do have a question, you don't feel like asking it maybe today in here, if something comes up and you want to ask a question, you can always send us an email and we'll be happy to answer your question. This is just designed to give you a very brief intro. I know what we're going to talk about today is probably not necessarily going to even scratch the surface, but I think the information that we talk about, that we convey today, is going to at least give you some tools that you can use going forward in making sure that your documents are accessible. And we're going to talk about a little bit about everything here that we've incorporated, mainly the use of styles in Microsoft Word, lists using the bullets and numbering options or features in there, alternative tagging for images and graphics. Very briefly, I know we've touched on that quite a bit in the last two presentations, but for anyone who maybe didn't get it, I will very briefly touch on it again. Setting up your own template, setting up your links when you link to, provide a link to a website within a document, creating accessible tables within Word, and I know that's a big one for some of you out there, and using the Microsoft Accessibility Checker. And lastly, saving to a PDF version of your document. So lengthy documents. Using templates, we always, templates are great. I think templates are a very good way for organizations to, avoid some of the pitfalls of accessibility if they're done correctly. You have a certain way you want people to use your logo and or embedding things in a header or a footer, etc. But templates can also be a very good way. For instance, if you have a lengthy document that you keep doing over and over again, for instance, maybe a report that your organization has to put together on a quarterly, annual basis, something like that. And sometimes it goes beyond, a few pages. Those can be very good. They can be very beneficial in terms of setting those up if you have a lengthy document like that. I would say if you do, I would recommend, maybe getting together and going over some things with your group to set up something like that. Cons are that sometimes you have things that are shorter that you don't necessarily need a template for, and you just want to make sure that your users are just exercising some of those basic options that we're going to go over today. Creating your own template, that can be very simple. Once you have a document set up, you can base it. If you've gone through some painstaking measures with your group and you've set something up and you've got it almost perfect, then that's always going to be a good basis for setting up your template for something like that. And we'll get into that a little bit more further on here. Applying styles to headings within a lengthy document. The reason why we use that a lot is because it creates a structure that helps anyone using some type of screen reader or navigation mechanism software through it. Those styles can be really beneficial. They can be really helpful in terms of informing the user about the level of hierarchy within a document. Use of styles are also beneficial in creating a table of contents. That's kind of an added bonus that you get from when you set up your document in that way, is that it's very easy to go in and then insert your table of contents based on those style designations for your different topics throughout your document. Lastly, the styles will also help your users of screen readers who are navigating through a document. That'll help them be able to pick out different topic areas that you've designated with those styles. So the way you and I would skim through a document and try to look for the more important information or something that maybe in particular we're looking for within a document, that can also aid very greatly in terms of users of screen reader software when they're trying to navigate a lengthy document like that. All right, slide 6, how to use styles. And I'm going to give you a very brief demo in just a second with sharing my screen. But again, you're going to go into the Home tab. That's the default tab in Microsoft Word. When you open up the document, you're going to see the Styles option, which is usually towards the far right of your screen. And it's got about 9 different levels of headings in a given document. I'm going to bring up my Microsoft Word document here. So if you're looking on the screen with me, to the very far right here, you've got some of your more commonly used styles that that Microsoft Word defaults to. Okay, that's basically what we're talking about, is those styles. You've got normal, no spacing. Those are more of your character styles. We'll go over that a little bit shortly. But you've got your headings, essentially 1 and 2. You've got a title and a subtitle. Okay, that's really what we're going to be talking about today. All right, moving on. How to use styles. We're going to go back to that share screen real quick. So to bring up that screen, we're going to actually bring up the styles menu. All right, so to do that, you've got a little corner here underneath the styles menu that you can double click on, and that's going to bring up my menu here. Okay, you're going to click on that View tab. You're going to select a navigation pane. This is actually a pane that I want you to bring up, and we talked about this in one of the last presentations, but that navigation pane is also going to help you when you're creating a lengthy document like this in terms of navigating through your styles and it's going to show you what shows up there, okay?
And Marissa, the
Yes.
navigation pane is also going to tell us how it's going to read it, right? So the screen reader is going to use that hierarchy to read it, right? That's the other reason
Yes.
we want to show that. Okay.
Very important. Thank you for pointing that out. So here we have the view here, okay, just so you can follow along with what I'm doing. You've got File, Home, you've got all these little tabs here. You're going to click on that View tab. And under here you've got Rulers. It's usually under that References, but Rulers, Guideline, Navigation pane, and we're going to check that off, and voila. Here is your navigation pane on your left-hand side that pops up, okay? That's basically going to be showing you that hierarchy once you start building in your document and labeling and things like that. Recommendations that we make are sans serif, which is the fonts that are most accessible due to readability or availability across multiple programs, softwares. If you are old school like I am, you might remember an old program called WordPerfect. For the longest time, it was either WordPerfect or Microsoft Word that you'd use. But again, going back and forth from that, that's just a little comparison I like to make in terms of when you're opening something up or you're converting it to a PDF file. Depending on what your users might be using to open that up, sometimes you've also got, I know a lot of people now are using Google Docs to open something up. But the important thing is that you select a font that kind of basically transfers, is what we're referring to when we're talking about this too. And that's the most basic, most readable format for whatever it is that your user is going to be using to open up the document or read through it. Whether you convert it to a PDF file or not. But again, when you're doing that, Arial or Verdana are usually the most widely used. And a minimum 12-point font size is what is recommended, okay, when you're doing these documents. Setting up your styles. I'm going to do a very brief demo here again. I'm going to share my screen and show you how to pull that up. Got your Word document open here. All right, to pull up that Styles menu, let me just get back out of there real quick. Going under the Home tab, you've got your main styles that are listed here to the right-hand side, but you can just basically click on that little corner and it's going to bring up this little sub-menu for the styles, okay? When it does that, what you want to do is, this is showing me, right now it's showing me all of the styles, or the styles that I can use within the document right now. You can also click under this little button here, up in the styles area. It'll show you, it'll scroll downward to show you some of these additional styles that I've incorporated. Now, yours may not look like mine if you open up your version of Word, and it might look a little bit different depending on whether you're using 2010 or 2013, whatever your version of Word is, okay? One of the things I want to point out though is once you pull this up, this little sub-menu, you're not seeing all those 9 styles that I mentioned earlier. There's 9 styles. That's as many as Word has, okay? You may or may not use them, depending on your level of depth in terms of working with documents for your organization. A lot of times, I can tell you I've not used all 9 styles, but you may end up doing that if you're someone who's compiling lengthy reports or a lengthy document, or if you are helping your organization write a proposal. At those junctures, you may be using all those 9 levels, but in order to find them, you're not seeing them in here right now because this is kind of what the default is within my document. To find the other levels of style headings, you're going to click down here on the options, and it's going to say Style Pane Options. It's going to bring up that submenu. Select Styles to Show. It's the very first drop-down menu here. Right now it's showing recommended, and what you want to do is select all styles, and you're going to hit the OK button. Now you're going to see all those different style level headings, 1 through 9, okay? And that's pretty much, and you're going to see a bunch more. You're going to see all these different other options that it's going to give you. Like I said, we're not going to go through we won't have time to go through everything today, but this will give you a good basic intro in terms of what you're looking at. Now, one thing I do want to point out too also is when you're going through your document, you can essentially incorporate these. They're not in your little shortcut menu here and you're above everything. You can incorporate those, and it's very easy to do that. So once you've decided there's however many levels you want to have, you can come back here to your options. Okay, we're going to go over that a little bit more, but there is a way to incorporate that. What I wanted to show you back here though is that the Styles Options menu can work one of 2 ways for you. You can also use it to track all the styles that you've been using within your document. And to do that, once you've incorporated the way that you want it, we're going to get to that a little bit later, but you're going to come back up here to that style pane and you're going to see in current document is what you want to select. Okay? Once you do that, it's going to show you all the styles that you're going to currently be using within your document. Okay, it's important for me to mention that because sometimes people will say, well, I saw everything, but I finally incorporated what I wanted. I want to see what's within my document.
Marissa, can you go over that one more time, please?
Sure. So what we did was we brought up the sub-menu of styles. Right now, as I've just clicked on that little corner there and brought up the menu, it's showing me only the styles that I've incorporated into the document, which I haven't really written anything, but essentially it's going on just some of these basic that are defaulting right now. To get it to show me the additional 9 levels, or all 9 levels, I'm going to click down here in Options, and in the very first drop-down menu, you're going to select All Styles, and then click OK. Once you do that, it's going to show you everything that you can incorporate, or however many levels you want to incorporate into your document. Okay? The caveat to that is that you may not want it. Once you've decided how many levels, you can certainly basically go back within your document so that it only shows you, so that you're not seeing all this stuff that you don't want. All right? You can basically redo it, clicking the options, and have it show you only what's in your current document.
Okay, that's where I missed. Yep. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of hard, and it's very easy when you're building something lengthy that you just want to be able to see what you're using as opposed to everything that you have access to.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So within those style levels you just showed you, those are the additional levels that you can incorporate in there. Select styles to show, as we did or just a second ago, and you can basically add them. I'm going to click on that styles menu when you bring it up again. You want to see those additional headings, right? So we're going to come back here. I'm going to show all styles. Click OK. Now, say you want to have up to 5 headings in a document. Well, up here, we're only showing 1 and 2, right? And even if I'm clicking down here in this little drop-down menu, it's still not showing me those other levels. It's showing me some of the more prominent things, what it thinks maybe, what it basically defaults to. So to add additional headings, you can right-click, and then you can basically add it to your quick style gallery. It's showing me it's in there already. Essentially, you should be able to. You can also create newer styles. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. You don't necessarily want to go doing that, but it's a little different in here. When I'm adding you can add these to the Quick Style gallery. So it's already showing in my Quick Style gallery. Otherwise, you just basically right-click and it'll give you the option to add it to your little Quick Style gallery up here so that it pops up in there. We're going to go a little bit more, delve into our lists and columns. What you want to do, if you've got something that you've got multiple lists or something, and you want to try to maximize some of the space within your Word document, we don't recommend using your tab key to create your own manual columns. Some of you might be tempted. It used to be back in the day that you can certainly do it. You can do it. Just because you can do it, though, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to transfer or translate the information well at all when someone's trying to use any type of navigation or screen reader software. So what we recommend is just, if you're going to do that, make sure you just insert additional columns if that's what you're wanting to do with the information. So you're not hitting the tab key. Why? Because, for instance, most of these softwares or these types of screen readers default to the tab key for use of navigation. So if you're tabbing through something like that, that can get pretty confusing for your users. Okay, making your own bullets. I know that you can go in and manually make like check marks or some really cool squigglies or whatever in terms of cool looking buttons for making your bullets. We recommend just using what's in the default list there, okay, the little black little bullet features in there, because this can get a little bit hairy when someone's using some type of screen reader software, or if it's augmentative, it just gets a little, it doesn't necessarily read it correctly, and that's what we're getting at there. Basically, when you're using something and you're trying to either number, or you're using a number, or a bullet list style, we do recommend using that list style here in Microsoft Word, and I'm going to show you real quick to create your lists. This is what we're talking about right here. Under your Home tab, you've got this little tiny bullet. You've got 1, 2, 3, and you've also got like an indented multi-level list too. So we recommend using those features instead of like creating your own. You can also bring up that paragraph. But again, what you want to do is use those functions. So you've got test. You would just type out your text, and then you're going to just click here, and there's your bullet. Okay, you can do the same thing with the number. Now, if you're going to be doing something a little bit more within a very, very lengthy document, you do have the option of using within styles. I'm going to click here, bring up the styles menu. Okay, you do have list styles that are down here. I'm not going to get too much into that right now, but here we go. You've got list. All right, you've got some different levels of list styles in here. I'm not going to delve into that too much because that's a whole other hour right there that we can talk about a little bit more. If you do want to talk more about that offline, you can certainly contact me, and I can give you some extra pointers or some extra info about that. Just to give you an idea, though, some documents can get pretty complicated rather quickly, but using these list styles sometimes can help you if you've got something that's maybe 30, 40, 50 pages long, even more, to where what happens is sometimes if you're using this little feature here, okay, it can be easy when you're going through something. For instance, I'm going to go back to that extra character line here where the default is. It can be easy for you to insert a list somewhere, and then maybe this right here is indented over here is this far, but sometimes it goes further over to the right. Okay, it's hard because it's not something that's always so easy to control in here. If you're trying to do that, this is using your list feature within styles is an easier way to make sure that they're all lining up in the same place. And that sometimes can be lost when you're doing something that's multi-level like that. And you know, I probably can't explain it any better at the moment, but if you have something lengthy, you can either try looking in here into your multi-level list. This is a little crazy, but you've got your 1A, typical, or you can try to use one of these features in here so that you're keeping it all in the same indent levels, etc. So as we said earlier, your styles are basically a good way of also providing you with a table of contents, and you can tell it. Once you've set up your headings however you want them, you will be able to tell it when you go to insert your table of contents how many levels you want to include or not include. It's pretty, it's kind of straightforward in there. I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to use that for my heading 1. Okay. And I'm highlighting this, and here's my heading 2, and say I've got another heading 2. Okay. That over here in your navigation pane is pretty much bringing up, here's your heading 1, and here's your heading 2 items. All right, and that's essentially kind of what your screen reader users are using when they're navigating your document. It's essentially marking those as here's a topic area that you can scroll through. Okay, but that's going to be basically what they're building from. When you go in here, I'm going to insert a page break with a references menu, and over here where you've got the option for table of contents, you can tell it what style, but essentially you've got your headings that you outlined. You've got your main first heading, and then your headings 2 down here. Okay, so that's essentially what it does. It's going to put that in there. The more complicated you get, or the more levels that you've got in there, it's going to insert those. You may not necessarily want to include them. So you can certainly go in and you can delete them. Okay, there's a very easy way to delete that. You can just come in here and delete them off of there if that's what you want to do. Just remember, when you're adding or scrolling through your document, you're going to right-click in here, right-click, update field. Okay, as you're going through a document, as you're building your document, update field is going to update your table of contents according to whatever you've added in just previously. And again, so that's why we say if you're going to build a lengthy document, you don't necessarily need to keep this in mind as you're building through your levels. Just keep in mind whatever headings you're including, they're going to be in that document, and you can go and remove them later. But I would recommend waiting until you're completely finished with your document to do this step, so that you can decide at the end of your document what you want to include and what you don't want to include.
So Marissa, when do we use the update table of contents? Is that Is
You
that if
can-
you're building it as you go?
Yeah, you can use it anytime. You can use it as you're building it as you go along. Just remember, a lot of people, you can tell it to update the page numbers only, okay?
Okay.
This is, for instance, if you're building it, or you can update the entire table. I always do entire table. However, when you do that, keep in mind that it's not just these levels, okay, that you're including that are necessarily going to be included in there. So you can take those out once you're done. Just keep in mind, you know, the cleaning up of the table of contents is probably usually one of the last things that we take care of when we're building something lengthy like that. Because I guarantee you, sometimes whether you mean for it to or not, there's some things that wind up in there that you may not want. So you're going to have to go back in and just delete them afterwards.
So you suggest creating the whole document and then going back and adding your table of contents, seeing if everything's there the way you want it, and then you can always delete something.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Or you can add it, you know, after you want to make sure that what you're incorporating there, that you're doing it correctly too. So you can add it in at the beginning and keep adding it in and going and looking at it just to make sure if you're on the fence and you're not sure that your headings or things are getting incorporated, you can certainly, you know, at any point in time add that in there and just keep going back and checking it. You can always update your table of contents as you go through your document, whatever else you're adding in. So you can do that at any time. You're just going to right-click in there within that, anywhere within that field. You just select it, and you're going to right-click. And it's giving me the option right here, too, to update the table. Okay? Once you clean it out however you want it, and you've got whatever in here that you want, when you do the update, you want to do page numbers only. And that way it's not re-bringing in everything that you've deleted out of there.
Thank you. Thank you,
Sure.
Marissa, for explaining this.
Hyperlinks that translate. Now, if you've been following along from the last two presentations, you will notice that my hyperlinks are all written out. They're all drawn out. They're not, what I mean by that is that it's not just like when you scroll something around and you just see the word, it's hyperlinked, right, in that blue. And I'll give you an example here. And say I want to create a link within my document to our organization website, right? Well, you notice once I've typed that in there and hit enter, it's hyperlinked it automatically, right? Because Word's picking up on that. But we don't necessarily want to do it that way, right? If we're going to be sharing this only electronically, for instance, for an example, you want to just create the one word. So what I mean by that is you're going to highlight the document and you're going to right-click on it, and you can edit hyperlink in here. That's going to show you how to do this within your document. Up here where you have text to display, you'll notice it's not letting me select it. So what you want to do, instead of putting this entire link in here, if this is, again, only if you're going to be sharing it electronically. If you're going to be sharing this in print, then you may want to think about including just the regular links. But some links are so lengthy that you might want to include them a little bit differently. For example, in a references section or an endnote or a footnote even. What we can do within the document is highlight the word, and I'm going to right-click on it, and then I'm going to go to the hyperlink here in the menu. Once we do that, then you can put your address of whatever it is in there, in the address, okay? Up here where it says text to display, I've put the word website, which is what we right-clicked on, okay? If you want something else, you can always edit it in here, but you're going to click OK, and now you've hyperlinked it. You can copy and paste it in there as well. If you're not wanting to type the whole thing out, most of us can't. I can't remember sometimes, but I know I want to include this certain, website within my text, so I'm just going to go in there, write out the word, or highlight the word that I want, right-click on it. It's going to take us to hyperlink right there from that menu, and then you can just paste into that address right here. Click OK, and there you've hyperlinked it. Avoiding the dreaded click here. I don't know if you've seen that when you're scrolling through a document, or if you've seen someone, maybe someone's compiling an email. We use Constant Contact, which is a program to do our emails, and a lot of times we've had people where they put click here and they embed the link that way. It's really just better if you put the word in or whatever word it is that you want to use, and when someone's navigating the document or whatever it is, click here is not really helpful because For instance, if you have 9 different places where you want someone to go to a website or see that there's something embedded there, click here is going to come up. If they search your document, okay, it's going to come up 90 times. And that's not really helpful to someone who's navigating your document with a screen reader, because click here doesn't really tell them. You want to be descriptive about where you're trying to tell them to go. Our website or the ADA Center website, okay? Something like that that's not telling them just click here. Can drive people crazy. I can't tell you how many times we've heard something about that when we've, someone's embedded something in a document. For print document, that's really, if you're going to be sharing it via print, you're going to be printing silver copies and sharing it for whatever the purpose is, then you may want to include the actual URLs at the end of your document or as a footnote or an endnote, okay? That's what we recommend, because you're not sacrificing space, or if that's the case, but you're also not sending someone who's using a screen reader on this wild goose chase, because it's going to pick up every single character of that address that you're including in there. The problem is that most people that do not have screen readers don't seem to know how to click on hyperlinked items. If I didn't mention this before, I know I've mentioned it in the past, there's so many different screen readers out there, and everybody's different. There's a lot of free stuff that people are using, or you may have users dated or outdated screen readers that they haven't updated in a while. So again, it's really hard to predict. The best recommendation I can give is that try to be descriptive. Anything besides click here will be helpful. For people not using a screen reader, it's going to depend on whether you're sharing this digitally or just in print. But what you could do is you could put a footnote, or you can put a little endnote, which will create the little number, and they can go use that number to click at the end of your footnote or your endnotes, and it'll give them the whole link. That's where you can embed that. If you don't use click here, some of our folks don't know to click on the hyperlink text and put it in endnotes or footnotes. That's an easy way for them to direct them to whatever the link is, if they don't know how to do click here. Usually though, if you've included that hyperlink, when you scroll over it, it'll bring up, once I scroll over it with my cursor, it says control click to follow the link. Again, some people may or may not pick up on that. If you're using your references, you can come here and insert, say, an endnote, and it's going to do www.southwest.org. Okay, so when we're coming back up here, it's putting a little number there, and it's telling you that's the website where you can go to for that. Okay, that's my other suggestion for something like that. You don't think the readers are going to pick up on it. Okay, creating accessible tables. I know the moments you've been waiting for. Just some quick suggestions when you're doing this. Avoid using the table, draw table feature in Word. We kind of go back and forth on. Word has gotten much better. It used to be that if you use this function, and I'm going to show it to you in just a second, it used to be that if you use this create function just off of the menu, that it didn't work correctly sometimes, and screen readers would have trouble sometimes navigating it. But essentially, I'll show you what we're talking about there. And again, this is back and forth. I think Word has gotten quite a bit better now, that where if you do use that function, it'll tell you right away when you run the accessibility check whether or not it's going to pick that up. Avoid merging or splitting your cells, and I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. Avoid inserting blank rows to space out data, and I am king. I used to do this all the time because it just looks so much neater if you give it a space between. And, I used to think that was great. Wow, I'm giving this real simple table, making it easier to read. It's better to adjust the height or the width using the menu, the properties menu for your table if you're doing that. Avoid nested tables. This can get really complicated. If you've done a lengthy document where you have a lot of tables in there, a table within a table is what we're talking about. I can't really tell you off the top of my head why someone would want to do this, but maybe they're trying to make something, I don't know, maybe they're trying to save space. The only thing I can think of is sometimes when we're writing proposals for grants, we are really pressed for space, and so we try to incorporate things to where we're saving the space, but it's not accessible. I would recommend avoiding, having a table within a table, because that can get very, very tricky. Screen readers, I guarantee you, will not pick up on that. You're keeping your table width to the same width as your page. This is, for instance, if it runs off the page, I don't know where it would go, but screen readers will keep on reading and reading and reading and reading it. So I'll show you how to do that in just a sec. To try to isolate your tables to a single page, sometimes this can be very hard to avoid. If you have something lengthy and you've got a table that's really long, it may be hard to keep one table to a single page if it runs the span of 2 or 3. It's just not going to be possible. But you want to try. We always recommend trying to keep it to a single page if you can, and including a title or description for your tables. I'll show you how to do that in just a second as well.
Marissa, question. Okay, so if you're keeping a table to just one page, what if you have a table that has got columns that have a lot of information in each column? So you get as much on one page and then you go to the next page and you're still in those columns. Do you redo the heading for each page? So in essence, it's the same table?
I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. So
okay.
You asked a great question. So what I was talking about earlier, and Anne-Marie made a great point, you're going to select the option in your Tables Properties menu to where the rows repeat. Okay, it's called Rows to Repeat at the top. You're going to click on the Insert menu, and of course you've got your table right here. What the recommendation used to be was that you not do this, okay? Because here it just gives you how many cells and how many columns. You can make it 20 columns. 10 columns. The recommendation was that you not do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit my Tab key, and it's going to take me to the next cell. It's going to take me to the next cell. Essentially, how that's going is basically how someone might be using their screen reader to navigate your table with that Tab key function. And what they were saying before was that used to be very difficult sometimes if you created the table in such a way with this little feature right here, Draw Table, or with that feature where we just basically inserted it and told us however many we wanted. That gets crazy right there. What they recommend is instead, when you click down here in this Tables menu, it's going to bring it down, and it can be a little tricky depending on what level of Word you're in, but you can go to this Insert Table feature here and then tell it how many columns. You want 4 columns and 6 rows. It's going to insert my table that I've told it that I want 4 columns and 6 rows. You can come here, click on the outer corner here to highlight your table. With that, once you do that and highlight your table, you can right-click anywhere in there, and it's going to bring up this sub-menu. And you're going to click Table Properties. That's the very last entry there in that menu. This is where you can really designate that information. Row, that's where you're, what Anne-Marie was asking just a second ago, is how are we going to be able, do we need to copy and paste the header if your table is going to be very lengthy and span across a couple of pages? That's not what you want to do, okay? Because the screen reader's not going to pick up that is your header row. What you want to do here is you're going to click on this option that says Repeat as Header Row at the top of each page. But what you want to do is, before you do that, you're going to select that top header row that you've created. I'm going to just highlight that row, and then you're going to right-click, go to Table Properties again to bring up that menu, and that's where you're going to click Repeat as Header Row at the top of each page. So now you've told it what your header row is, okay? Going back to what I said earlier about making sure that the table just spans the width of your page, allow row to break across pages, you're going to deselect that, okay, when you create your table. Always deselect that so that it keeps the width of your table just to your page. I haven't had too many problems with this, so my best recommendation is when you do your accessibility checker, it can point out right away whether or not if you've had an issue with the table that you've created. Mainly what they don't want you to do here is you go to Insert, Table, and you draw your table with this little pencil here. This is what they don't recommend you doing. This is more of a drawing type feature than anything else. We just did the Identifying Repeating Row header. Again, you're just going going to right-click on that table, and you can tell it which one to do. I'll do it really, really quickly again for you. Once you scroll over your table, you're going to get that little thing on the left-hand corner, and then you can right-click on it to bring up the table properties, and it tells you what you've got selected already. All right, your friend, the tab key. I think I went over this just a second ago, but essentially that's how users are going to be using, that's what it defaults to in terms of screen readers navigating your table. It's going to be with that tab key. Captions. Inserting captions or alt tagging. Just like you would an image, you're just going to right-click on your table and you're going to add an alternative text there for it. So I'm going to click on that little corner on the left to highlight the whole table, and then you're going to right-click, select Table Properties, and the last tab here is Alt Text, and you're going to give your table and then a description of what you want your users to know, whatever your description is going to be. You're going to hit OK, and basically you've added that. We recommend doing that because, again, it just depends on what screen readers are picking up on, or what, there's just so much out there that, whatever your user is relying on to navigate through your document. Sometimes a screen reader might treat something as an image. It just depends. So it's important to have that identifying information in there.
Marissa, we have a good question from Wayne, and he says, so when I tab through to check reader readability, it wants to add a next row. How do I fix that?
Can you explain a little bit more about what the problem is? I'm not understanding.
Okay, so when I build a table, my understanding is that they use the tab to read through the table.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go back to check to make sure that it's reading the table in the right order,
mm-hmm.
when I get to the end of the table and hit tab one more time, it adds another row onto the bottom of my table. It won't let me out. It just keeps on adding empty rows onto my table.
Let me do a little research, because I know what you're talking about, because it's basically when you're building your table, that's another way of adding an additional row in there. So
right.
it may be...
So how do I get around that so that I don't create a perpetual loop for somebody using the reader?
So essentially, I mean, you don't have to navigate through it. You can test it by navigating. If you navigate through a couple of rows, you don't have to navigate through the whole table. You can navigate through a couple of rows, and that should tell you right off the bat. If it's working, it'll work right off the bat. If it's not working, then it's not going to let you navigate to the next cell with using the tab key. You see what I'm saying?
So with the reader, it's not necessarily going to do that. It just does that because I'm using Word, not the reader.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because and the other thing is when you do, Microsoft has an accessibility checker too. That's your last stage. When you do that, it's going to pull up if it's not navigable. Okay.
Well, and that's where it tells you to tab through to make sure that it goes on,
yeah.
And that's how I discovered the infinite loop.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So, essentially, if you're able to tab through the first, 2 rows, you should be okay. That's what we usually do. But I do understand that. You can, or you can just try to tab through the very second to last cell, and that way it won't add that extra row. That was a great question, by the way. So to add captions, very easy. We're going to do the same thing. You're going to right-click on your table, and then you're going to get the option to add the caption in there. Select our table here. We're going to right-click, and we're going to go to Insert Caption, and right here is where you can give it a caption as well, just a description. Now, when you're adding captions, you've noticed I've got this information here. Just try to be as, it's not a whole lot of space that you have in there, so you're not going to get a whole lot of space to type that in there, but you can just basically type in your table title, okay? Describe what you're putting in there, and then just hit OK, and it's put it on top of there. You can put it on the bottom as well. You just have to select that option if that's what you want to do. Right-click, and I'm going to go to Insert Caption. Position is where you can tell it if you want it below, and hit OK, and it's put it underneath there. It's really whatever style of document you're trying to do. We've already talked about keeping the table the same width of your page. It's that option of allow rows to break across pages. You want to always deselect that. Positioning your bookmark to bookmark the table. This can be helpful, again, when someone is going through just like your headings, you can bookmark the tables to be included in your table of contents. You can do that. The headings will, a lot of times it will automatically automatically be picked up, sometimes maybe not. So you can include information in there about the table. Am I better off just using the caption option to give my table a title? We always recommend doing all of it because that is, again, you can't predict what software people might be using, what screen reader they're going to be using. So it's hard to predict sometimes how a screen reader picks up something like that. It may treat it as an image, it may not, depending on the type of screen reader that somebody's using. Sometimes if, for instance, and I don't like to say this, but sometimes people are using more outdated screen reader software, and so it may choose to pick it up as an image versus the table. I'm not saying it just happens sometimes. Okay, in the very first cell there of your table, you're going to go to that insert under the insert menu, and you're going to see bookmark right here, and that's going to bring up the bookmark menu. Bookmarks work a little bit differently. Don't put spacing in there. What you want to do is if you're going to have multiple words for that name, make sure that you use an underscore instead of spaces. And then you're going to click Add. Okay? Now what you've done is you've bookmarked it. You're not going to see anything right away, but you've bookmarked that so that later on when you're creating your table of contents, you can include it. But essentially the other thing to remember here is if someone's navigating through your document with a screen reader, they can go, it's going to basically give them a little bit of a map for all the tables that you've done in there so that they can decide whether or not they want from the description. They can scroll through, like you and I skimmed through a document. As I mentioned earlier, when they're scrolling through your document, it's going to come up table. This is a table of blah, whatever it is. The next one is the next table of whatever it is. So they can decide whether or not they want to even look at that portion of your document, if they want to even look at the table. Adding alternative text, we just went through that. Again, you're just going to right-click on it like it's basically as if it were an image. Oh, my favorite, Microsoft Accessibility Checker. This primarily works the same way depending on what level of Word you're using, but I'm going to just very quickly kind of show you. Under your File menu, just like you're going to go to Save, you're going to check for issues here where it says Prepare for Sharing. And then you can bring up the check for accessibility. It's already showing you blank tables, blank rows. That's what it'll come up as if you're inserting if you're inserting a whole row here in between your text. That's what they don't want you to do because that's going to be something that gets picked up on as just a blank row. And here we've got unclear because I didn't put the HTTPS in there. So again, this is your accessibility feature within Word. It's really helpful. It doesn't resolve everything, but it can tell you basically as you're clicking through here, right? It's going to show you where my problem is, where the other problem is, okay? And it's going to give you some tips too. There are some additional things. It'll also show you here under the additional information as to why you need to fix this, how you can fix this, and it can be really helpful in terms of trying to do something like that.
Sorry, my fingers were flying too fast. So a lot of times if I'm making a form to send somebody electronically, I'll use a table for you put the information in there, and that gives the accessibility checker fits. Is it okay if I know it's a form and I've done it that way, we're good with that?
Yes, that's okay.
Or is there a better way to do that?
No, that's actually that's really the best way. That's actually okay. If it's meant for the user to fill in, okay, that's what he's asking is if you're sending somebody something blank to fill in, that is okay. Because they can navigate through the table and they'll know.
The last time I did it, I just put the captions in saying put in information here, put in information there.
Yeah, and that's fine too. Okay. But yeah, essentially that's all it is when someone's what we were saying earlier was, I like to insert a blank row here and there because I think it looks great. I think it makes it look neater and more presentable. But to someone with a screen reader, they're just going to pick up on that that's an empty row. So that's really what the screen reader is going to tell them, that there's no information there. But if it's meant to be that way, for his example, that there's a form that they want you to fill in, then of course that's going to be fine. Okay? Converting to PDF, very quickly here, we got 1 minute. Be careful with using Word's Save As feature. Make sure you run that accessibility checker, okay? Those hyperlinks that we talked about earlier, those can be problematic when you're converting to PDF because in my experience they don't always translate. So that's the other thing, the other reason why we were saying instead of putting click here or make sure you're designating what information you want them to click on. Those electronic links, they translate a lot better, and it's a lot easier if you put those in an EndNote or a reference area, and then they can go in. It's just not always it doesn't always pick up on it for whatever reason, and depending on what you're using. If you're using Adobe, those can be pretty straightforward, but we use Nuance a lot here, which is another program, and I guarantee you we've always had some kind of issue where it doesn't always pick up the link. Or sometimes you have a user who's put in the link and they forget to hit enter, so it doesn't hyperlink the link, and of course it doesn't translate. It's always good when you're going through that. If you start out with something and you make sure it's accessible before you create it, before you do PDF, that's a lot of times too when you're converting and you do Save As in Word to PDF, because it does give you that option now. It doesn't always translate if you haven't, tagged your images or something. That's not going to translate to your PDF when you're saving as PDF necessarily. So you just want to be careful when you're doing that you've got, all your information ready to go, as if it were in that regular format. Okay. Ensure the create bookmarks, link, add links, and all those are enabled in there. Again, you can if you're using Adobe, this is just in the settings. You just want to make sure that all these are checked off when you launch that menu to create it. Okay, in your Adobe PDF feature. Checking accessibility in Adobe, it's similar a little bit to the way you do it in Word, but you basically want to run that full check, not the quick check. That way it picks up on anything that you might have going on that might have been missed with the word checker. Resources, these are some things I threw in there. One of my favorites is the 7 steps to create an accessible Microsoft Word document. They've updated it. I think I got this back from 2014, but they have since updated it. So there's some really good, resources in here for you to check out. If you want something more in depth too, give me a call or send me an email, and I'll try to give you some other stuff from my list of goodies. But these are pretty good, especially this Level Access Compliance Resources. That is one of my faves. It's got a lot. It's very extensive in there, and it doesn't take up too much time looking through that. Very quickly, I just want to say thank you again for sticking around.
I just want to say thank you to everybody on the team that stayed over. Deb did have to step out because she had another meeting she had to go to. But, just again, on behalf of Train PD, I just want to say thank you because it's just a valuable resource. And Marissa, you've been wonderful, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for having me, and I sure hope this helped. Always feel free to call if you have a question about something. I'm happy to answer. If I can't find it, I'll research it for you.
Thanks, and take care, everybody.
Thank you.